This week in post, I'm correcting and transforming perspectives on a street scene from Madrid, Spain. Hi everyone, my name is Scott Davenport and welcome back to In Post, this video series where I do post-processing of an image and show you some of the techniques I use when I'm making my photographs. And typically the photo I'm working on is from an in the field video where I've taken you with me on a photo shoot and shown you some of the compositional choices or the camera settings that went into actually capturing the image. So this week it's a street scene in Madrid, Spain, some nice architecture and some good traffic lines. And the thing for this week I think is most interesting, at least most unique for me, is I needed to do some correction of the perspective where the buildings were just a little bit too warped and I wanted to fix that up. And so, well, let's dive in. We're going to do a little bit of blending, a little bit of basic adjustments, and then we'll get to the perspective correction and the final stylization. In Lightroom, I've got a bunch of different images from this shoot, and here's just a few of them. This one up here is the final image, and I'll show you how I crafted that. These are just a handful of the ones that I took. This lower row here are catching traffic at different times, and they were more test shots. You can see the sky is still pretty bright, so the sun hadn't completely dipped down past the horizon and blue hour hadn't set in. So that's me on scene, fine-tuning how I wanted to have the camera set. But these two here are what I'm going to work with. This one's pretty solid all around. I've got good traffic lines going through. The sky's a really nice color. The building's a little dark for my tastes. And so that's where this second image is going to come in. I've got a brighter shot with this building here. Can do a bit of blending to bring these guys together and just recover some of the brightness into the building here. Not a complete replacement, but just a partial blend to bring those two together. Let me show you quickly some of the settings in Lightroom that I used. And other than the lens corrections down here at the bottom, everything was done in the basic panel. So white balance is low. It's a cool shot, and I wanted to keep that feeling. This was somewhat counteracting the artificial lighting, which street lights usually have some type of color cast to them. And in this particular image, I just needed to play around with the white balance to counteract that. Slight tweak to exposure, play with highlights and shadows, especially the shadows. If I double click that, you can see how dark this image came out. The camera's doing some metering and it's picking up lots of, particularly the headlights coming toward me. Those are bright. But the buildings became very, very dark. So I brought the shadows all the way up to recover a lot of that detail. I'm not caring about this, bit of building on this side and this, nondescript, relatively unattractive portion of the photo over here, because those are going to go away as I go through the rest of the processing. The other thing I did is a minor tweak to the black point and then gave clarity just a little touch. As far as the overall sets of contrast and dimension, adding dimension to the photo, I'll do that in the photo suite. Similar for the other photo I'm going to use. Same type of thing. I like this one I mentioned for the buildings, and this streak of blue. There's a police car that zipped through. That's pretty cool. So that'll be a nice little splash of color to add into the photo overall. But same types of changes. I think the main one that's different here is tint. I did need to play with that because at this time of the day, the photo had a kind of a reddish cast. If I were to reset this to 0, you can see what I'm talking about here. This building didn't look natural to me. It was not this color, and I'm not sure exactly if there was a lot of outbound traffic going by, throwing up a lot of red brake lights or what, but I didn't like that, so pulled that back to counteract that type of lighting situation. Everything else is pretty much the same as we saw in the other photo. And so with that, I'm going to grab both of these and send them over to the Perfect Photo Suite, File, Plug in Extras. And I want to open them as layers because I'm going to do blending. With the two images in layers, let me show you how I blended these two together. So on the bottom, I have our base image which is the darker one. The nice blue hour sky is here. That's looking great. Traffic looks cool. Buildings are a little bit dark. The top layer is the buildings that are a little brighter, had some of those blue streaks I wanted to pull in. And the magic of the blending here is really the blending mode. So on this top layer, I've set the blending mode to lighten. And so that's going to brighten up the overall image. It compares these two layers and then will show the brighter pixels. Now I didn't want a complete brightness because the sky in this top layer, which is masked away, you can see the mask here, that's much brighter. You can even see that just here in the thumbnail. I want to maintain that nice, deep, rich blue sky. I also didn't want a harsh transition where this top edge of the building was very bright. That wouldn't look natural against the dark blue sky, but something more gradual. So you can look at the mask here. If I do a Control M, you can see that this is kind of, somewhat faded in. And how I accomplished that was using a gradient filter, dropping the gradient bug with, let me just click that on there, and using the linear top. So I'm masking away what's on the top. So I'm revealing the darker colors on the bottom, and did that with a nice gentle fade. And then turn to the quick mask and the masking brush to remove the effect entirely from the bulk of the sky, because I want that full rich blue sky to come through. And so the end result is we have this. So this is the before, the base image here, and then blending in portions of this secondary image to just kind of brighten up those building fronts and pick up a few more traffic trails. Now you can see I've done the final work here. From here I took these two layers, did a layer, new stamped layer, and then did some work in effects. But before I go into effects, there's one more thing we're going to do to this image, and I'm going to use Photoshop to do that because it's the right tool for the job. So I've loaded this image into Photoshop, and you can see we still have the same three layers that were in Perfect Layers: the base image, what I've masked, and then my composite. I'm going to work on the composite layer. Now I came into Photoshop to address some perspective on this. I mentioned these buildings here are adding nothing to the image, and these guys are a little more tilted than I'd like, one of the side effects of shooting with a wide-angle lens. So I'm going to use the warp feature, warp. We'll do, I think transform warp is going to be what we were going to play with here. And you get this grid, and I'm just going to start grabbing and pulling on some of these points here. If I can grab it, there we go. And this one middle here too. And slowly kind of stretching the image outward. Let me zoom out just a little bit. There we go. Command minus for that one. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So slowly kind of tugging this so that I'm getting a better look at the, these buildings are not being as crazy bowed as they are. And this has the nice benefit of also kind of taking these ugly buildings, the edges of these buildings that aren't adding to the photo, and moving them out of the frame, or at least very close to the edges of the frame, so I can do some final retouching on them, just to just more simply remove them. So something like this. I mean, you get the idea. I'll fiddle around with this for a few more minutes to fine-tune it, but that's the basics of it. And then from there, I'm just going to save this, and then it'll return me to Lightroom, and I'm going to go bring this right back into the photo suite and finish things up there. So this is the end result after playing around with the perspective warp, the transform warp in Photoshop, and brought it back into layers, and then used a combination of the Perfect Eraser and the clone tools to smooth away the remaining little bits of the buildings on either side and turn that into a smart layer. That's why we're seeing these tools are no longer highlighted. I've made this into a smart layer so I can apply effects. Now let's get into effects, and we'll look at what we did to finish this image off. So in effects, a handful of things. First, the color enhancer, and this is predominantly for the sky. You can see the sky is getting a lot bluer. The filter options are hiding. There we go. You can see the blue channel has brought up quite a bit of saturation, and maybe a little in the aquas. No, didn't even have to touch that one. So everything was just in the blues, bringing the saturation up, getting that blue hour to really shine through. tone enhancer next. And you're going to see that is going to kind of just correct everything overall. Brought the shadows up just a little bit more and added some detail and some clarity here to crispen up the buildings. You know, why did I use the tone enhancer instead of dynamic contrast? I don't have an answer for you. I just happened to pick that one this time around. Maybe because I knew I was going to use the tone enhancer again for this second level. Now this one's got a lot more masking going on. Control M to see the mask. I'm only doing this for the buildings, and it's a pretty lazy mask. Mostly just, you know, a couple of few brush strokes over here, and on the edges using the perfect brush to keep things just applied to the buildings. But the things that are going on here is it's a little more of the details. Come on, computer, catch up with me. There we go. A couple more tweaks to details and a little more rise on the shadows using the tone curve. So, you know, the tone curve, these are your darkest darks, these are your brightest brights, and you can use various points and set anchor points like this one so you can control exactly what you're doing. And so this was just a very gentle tug from here to about here up on the shadows just to brighten those buildings ever so slightly more. Back up to the filter stack, the last thing, an adjustable gradient. And this is mainly for the foreground here. You can see the mask is nothing being applied to the top, just to the bottom. And this was to darken the street and give more contrast there. So you can see the preset here. I started with darken, and then I brought the brightness down pretty significantly and added up some contrast. A little more vibrance too, just to get those colors on the right-hand side of the image to pop through. And that's it. That's the end of processing for this image. I might do a little bit of a crop because I don't like the parking sign, and there's not that much going on over here that it's worthwhile to go to the effort of removing this. That would be a pretty complex removal, and this little section of the photo is not adding much, so I'll probably just take this in Lightroom and do a little final crop on it to finish it off. So that is the processing, and the tip of the week is to use the right tool for the right job. Now, the right tool, I'll put that in air quotes, the right tool will really depend on you. For me, the big thing here was Photoshop. That's not something I normally use. I think it's the first time I've shown Photoshop in one of these videos, and it's not because I don't like Photoshop, it's just because most of the time the right tool for me is Lightroom or the ON1 Photo Suite. But when it came to doing this correction of the perspective, Photoshop was the right tool. That gave me exactly what I needed, and I was able to correct what I wanted very quickly. There are lens corrections and distortions you can control in Lightroom, but they weren't as fine-grained and fine-tuned as what I could do in Photoshop. So jump into Photoshop, get it done quickly, and then get back to making the final image that I want, and not wrestling and wrangling with the tools. So use the right tool for the right job. And again, the right tool is what's most comfortable for you, what's going to get you to your final image the quickest. So that brings us to the end of this Week in Post. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, it'd be great if you could let me know. Drop me a +1, like, shoot a comment on the video, send me a questions. I love getting your questions. If you've got a question about post-processing, about certain filters that you've seen me use, or why do I do this and not that, or vice versa, those are all great. They make me think about, oh yeah, why did I do that? And then when I can explain that, hopefully you'll get some benefit out of that, and if it works for your photography, great. Until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Thanks very much.